10 countries that will collapse in 2025. What do you do when a country's economy fails? When corruption, violence, and bad management create a massive problem? What do you do when essential resources run out and governments are too weak to fix them? As tensions come to a boil around the globe and resources run low, several countries are on the verge of economic collapse in 2025. Can they turn it around, or are they stuck in chaos? The disaster countdown has started. 10 Chad. Chad is on the verge of collapse, dealing with a difficult mix of poverty, climate tragedies, and economic problems. As of 2022, practically 45% of its population is in poverty, and extreme poverty has increased by 2.6% in 1 year, pushing millions into further suffering. Climate change is making things worse, with expanding deserts and shrinking Lake Chad, which threatens food security, especially for rural farmers who rely on the soil. On top of that, Chad's economy is oil-based, but its oil reserves are running out, leaving the country exposed. Politically, Chad is stable, but it is surrounded by chaos and is threatened by such groups as Boko Haram. The country also has hundreds of thousands of refugees and displaced persons, which puts strain on its already weak resources. With no quick fixes in sight, Chad is facing a difficult future. 9. Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. The DRC is a wealthy country that is stuck in poverty. It has huge deposits of minerals such as cobalt and copper, which are valuable for new technology, so theoretically it should be wealthy. But corruption, misrule, and civil war have kept the money out of the hands of ordinary people. Most of the country is controlled by armed groups, which makes it very hard for the government to establish order or collect taxes. Instead, profits from these resources are taken through illegal mining operations, and the country has almost no basic infrastructure. There are not many roads, so it is hard to move goods or to gain access to basic things like medical care. There's a huge human cost as well. Nearly half of all children under the age of 5 are malnourished, which slows their development and keeps generations poor. 8. Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau has experienced numerous issues. Since it became independent in 1974, the nation has suffered from constant political instability, with 4 successful coups and 17 attempted coups. This constant instability has damaged the economy significantly. Nearly 70% of the population lives in poverty, earning less than $2 a day. The economy is dependent on cashew nuts, but recent low harvests have further made things worse, increasing poverty from 59.9% in 2022 to 60.4% in 2023. Youth unemployment appears low, but that's mainly because most young people work in small-scale farming with little income or growth opportunities. Guinea-Bissau is also heavily in foreign debt, and inflation hit 7.2% in 2023 as food and fuel prices increased. 7. Eritrea. Eritrea, located in the Horn of Africa, is struggling with strict government control and a weak economy. The state is highly centralized, limits political freedoms, and operates with little transparency. This has led to serious human rights concerns and international sanctions. The agricultural sector, which is very important to the economy, is constrained by low productivity and frequent droughts. The mining sector, which is rich in resources such as gold and copper, is poorly developed due to poor infrastructure and lack of investment. With high public debt and restricted access to international financial markets, the economy of Eritrea is in a difficult position. The government tightly controls business activity, and without private sector growth, the economy has remained stuck. Inflation is very high due to a devalued currency and problems in supply chains. 6. Haiti. Haiti is experiencing extremely difficult economic times in the Western Hemisphere. Over half of the nation is in poverty, and most are not able to pay for basic services such as healthcare and education. The economy of the nation has contracted for 5 consecutive years, decreasing by 1.9% in 2023. Agriculture plays a big role in Haiti's economy, with key exports like vetiver oil, bananas, and cocoa. But even though farming is widespread, it hasn't been enough to lift the country out of poverty. The majority of the economy is informal, composed of small family farms, and is vulnerable to natural disasters. Political instability, corruption, and violence in gang enclaves make it extremely difficult to initiate any meaningful economic growth. With crime rising, including kidnappings, and the government depending on foreign aid for over 20% of its budget, Haiti's financial future looks bleak. Nearly 2.5 million Haitians survive on less than $1.25 per day, and poverty is growing each year. Right now, there are few signs that Haiti is on the path to recovery. 5. Malawi. Malawi's economy is struggling, mainly because it relies on agriculture. Over 80% of the people depend on farming, but the sector is very vulnerable to changes in rainfall and climate. In 2024, A devastating drought destroyed crops and caused food prices to soar, pushing nearly 3/4 of the population into extreme poverty. But this is just one of Malawi's major problems. Malawi suffers from huge budget deficits, rising debt, and a current account deficit of 18.7% of its GDP in 2024. Its foreign reserves are so low they can only cover imports for 2 weeks. Inflation, fueled by high food costs, continues to worsen. Malawi has deeper issues as well. Though the services sector is expanding, the economy remains too dependent on tobacco exports, which are declining. With a large number of young people entering the workforce and very few jobs available, the future looks uncertain. Political instability, slow reforms, and delays in restructuring its debt add to the problems. 4. Afghanistan. Afghanistan's economy is getting worse fast, especially since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. The country was already struggling with drought, COVID-19's impact, and government problems when it was hit hard by the withdrawal of foreign military spending and international aid. Afghanistan's economy shrank by a shocking 27% from 2021 to 2023, and many people have not been able to recover. Despite a modest 2.7% GDP growth, it is not enough to fix the damage. With a GDP per capita of just $372, it's clear that Afghanistan is in deep trouble. Foreign aid, which kept the country afloat for years, is now disappearing. The banking sector is barely functioning, with problems in money circulation, international payments, and increasing unemployment. Food insecurity has more than doubled, leaving nearly 36% of households unable to afford necessities. Strict Taliban regulations have driven away investment and forced many skilled workers to leave the country, pushing Afghanistan closer to economic collapse. 3. Central African Republic. The Central African Republic, CAR, is a nation with enormous potential, but an economy that isn't moving forward. Though rich in natural resources, the CAR has been plagued by political instability, war, and poor infrastructure, leaving its economy in tatters. With a GDP of only $2.3 billion and a per capita income of about $500, the nation remains one of the poorest in the world. Agriculture is the dominant sector, employing 70% of the workforce, but frequent droughts and floods destroy crops, forcing many into extreme poverty. The mining industry, which could transform the economy, has barely developed due to a lack of investment and infrastructure. Corruption and poor governance make things worse, with large parts of the country controlled by armed groups instead of the government. This instability prevents the country from passing effective policies or attracting foreign investors. 2. Burundi. Burundi, a landlocked country in East Africa, faces major obstacles to economic growth. Without direct access to the sea, trading goods is expensive and slow because the country relies on its neighbors for transport routes. Agriculture is the mainstay of the economy, with more than 80% of the population employed in it. Most of the farming, however, is for personal survival, with little surplus for trade or profit. Climate change has made things worse, with unpredictable weather disasters like droughts and floods making farming even harder. The financial system is weak, with commercial banks unable to support large projects that could drive economic growth. Inflation jumped from 18.9% in 2022 to 27.1% in 2023, raising the cost of living for most people. Poverty is widespread, with 71.8% of the population struggling to survive on very little income. Extreme inequality makes it even harder for people to escape poverty. With growth projected to fall to just 2.2% in 2024, Burundi's economic future looks bleak without major action. 1. South Sudan. South Sudan, the youngest country in the world, has been in crisis since gaining independence from Sudan in 2011. Despite its vast oil reserves, the country has been stuck in conflict almost from the beginning. Civil war broke out in 2013, leading to widespread destruction and displacement. Instead of funding critical infrastructure and services, resources are being used to sustain ongoing conflicts. The economy is dependent almost entirely on oil, which accounts for nearly all of its exports and government income. But oil prices are unstable, and when they drop, the country's revenues plummet. The oil fields are old and often damaged by ongoing violence, making production even more difficult. South Sudan's over-reliance on oil puts it at the mercy of global markets, and unless it builds other industries, the country will struggle to create a stable future. The humanitarian crisis remains severe, with millions of people at risk of starvation and dependent on foreign aid. With inflation high and the currency losing value, staple foods are becoming unaffordable for most people. That's it for today's deep dive. What do you think? Which nation is most likely to collapse in 2025, and which ones have a chance to recover? Leave your comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more updates. Stay tuned for the next deep dive.